centering silence, let us pause, step back from our own mind, and allow what is here to be here. No thinking right now, just taking note of this moment, a breath, space, simplicity, and the sound of a chime. And the sound of Harley Davidsons pulling by on Military Street in Holton on a beautiful summer morning. Opening words this morning, again, from a book I'm using this summer, from Earth Prayers. And this is a solstice prayer by poet Gary Snyder. Gratitude to Mother Earth, sailing through night and day into her soil, rich, rare, and sweet. In our minds, so be it. Gratitude to air, breath of our song, clear spirit breeze. In our minds, so be it. Gratitude to water, clouds, lakes, rivers, glaciers, holding or releasing, streaming through all our bodies like salty seas. In our minds, so be it. Gratitude to the sun, blinding, pulsing light through trunks of trees, through mists, warming caves where bears and snakes sleep. The sun wakes us. In our minds, so be it. And gratitude to the great sky, who holds billions of stars and goes yet beyond that, beyond all powers and thoughts, and yet is within us. Great space, the mind is our sky. So be it. Karen, would you like to light our chalice for us this morning? We'll find a matchstick right in the holder. And I'm going to call this our first chalice of the summer, even though it's a day early. And Karen, you can snuff it up. Symbol of light and knowledge, symbol of warmth and freedom. We light this chalice as a symbol of our faith. Here we gather to celebrate hope and the infinite possibilities of love. Let us light candles this morning. There's a lot going on this weekend. Between solstice coming tomorrow. Today's Father's Day.
It's today.
Oh, what time today?
I don't know, but I have a calendar at home that says that today is the first day of summer, and the one I have in my purse that says the same thing. So.
Oh, yeah, I didn't check my numbers. Usually it's the 21st, so sometime on the 21st. So, I brought in a couple of photographs for Father's Day. This is one that I used in the Backwoods blog earlier this week, a Hutchinson family photo from 1969, showing my sister and I, but my dad is in this picture, so I wanted to bring that in for the altar. And a second picture of my dad at Moosehead Lake in the summer, renting a cottage, and he was always the camp cook. And a shot of him here in a homemade chef's hat out of a paper bag, flipping pancakes or cooking breakfast on the grill. So that's how I remember my dad the best. It was like early. He was always the first guy up in the morning, getting the coffee pot going, and getting breakfast for us on weekends especially. So this candle is for all of our fathers, our grandfathers, who are still with us or who are gone, but we carry so much of that with us every day of our lives. So this candle is for that.
This is a candle to my dad, because he was pretty cool. I wouldn't be here without him. This is also a candle to all the dads who can't be with their kids because of family strife and so on, and misunderstandings, and there's apparently a lot of them. And today is a tough day for them, and I hope that that they get through it with hope and strength. It is a beautiful day. Thank you.
Juneteenth national holiday was yesterday, first one. So I light this candle as we reflect and observe and remember and move forward in our country and society. It's a candle for liberty and justice. And lighting a silent candle for any unspoken prayers this morning, people on our hearts that we're thinking of. And any names you'd like to share this morning? Let's say a prayer in just a moment. Marion, Chuck. For those concerns and names mentioned this morning, we hold them in the light of love and compassion. May all benefit in this world with well-being, sound mind, and peaceful resolution of conflict. We stand as one on this day and in this precious life, in this summer moment. Amen, and blessed be. We have a group reading today in your hymn book, number 547. It's a summer meditation. This is written by Robert T. Weston. Now blows the wind with soft, relaxing warmth.
The sun beats down, the schools are out.
Children swarm in the playgrounds and the streets, and eager city folk, vacation-bound, crowd the broad highways.
The lakes and seashores lose their solitude, and all the world seems turned to carnival.
What of ourselves? There could be now deep peace, a time for soul searching,
We might return to examine our own lives, to sort and probe our tendencies of thought,
to sift the true from false in the things of doubt,
the
Beautiful from the ugliness
unmarked.
The sun beats down. It is a time for pause.
Even the trees seem resting for a time, as if to meditate and gather strength for the more strenuous times that lie ahead.
And shall not we? Here's the unfinished clay, half molded, that still waits on us.
To
think
what we have been, and as we are, still yet have to come.
On the altar today, you'll see a card of Henry David Thoreau. And there's an addition to, we modified the card with a smiley face button on his lapel. Years ago, we did a series of talks, and we all had smiley face buttons that year, and we explored the essentials of life. And Thoreau got his smiley face button that year. So today, with summer meditations, we're continuing. Today's topic is the morning work, based on one of the books that I introduced last week, by Thoreau's Morning Work by H. Daniel Peck. And on the altar, I brought in other books from the Don Raymond collection that he donated to the church, a copy of the complete journals of Thoreau, these 2 bottom volumes. And this is a book called The Thoreau You Don't Know by Robert Sullivan, a different take on Thoreau's writings. Just came out like 10 years ago. And this is Faith in a Seed, which is a manuscript of Thoreau's last book that he was working on, and notes before he died. So these are all in our library, if you'd like to check them out sometime. So I'm going to be reading this morning the introduction from Peck's book on Thoreau's morning work. This larger project I call morning work. The phrase, of course, comes from Walden, where it calls up wakefulness, morning, and deliberateness, work, implicitly setting these forth as standards for efficacious human activity. As I develop the term, morning work is most significantly the work of memory and perception, as these faculties conjoin to serve Thoreau's emerging vision of cosmos. I see memory and perception as Thoreau's 2 key, inextricably related activities of consciousness. And the phrase from Walden that he's referring to was, what should be our morning's work in the world? So I'm going to I took a trip to Concord over 10 years ago, which Concord, Massachusetts, kind of the mecca of the American New England Transcendentalist movement, on a 4-day trip. And what came out of that was a series of talks that fall, titled Morning Work. And earlier this spring, as I was going through old files, I came across these transcripts. So I'm going to read just a bit from this today, where this material comes from. And on that first point of the work, on morning work, the morning is attributed to being awake. And here's what Thoreau had to say in Walden. Every morning is a cheerful invitation to make my life of equal simplicity, and I may say innocence, with nature itself. All intelligences awake with the morning. To be awake is to be alive. Yet I have never met a man or a woman who is quite awake. We must learn to reawaken and keep ourselves awake, not by mechanical aids, but by an infinite expectation of the dawn. I know of no more encouraging fact than the unquestionable ability to elevate our life by a conscious endeavor, to affect the quality of the day. That is the highest of arts. And that came from the chapter, Where I Lived and What I Lived For, in Walden. In the second part of morning work was the work or deliberateness. And again from Walden, Thoreau says, I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover I had not lived. Let us spend one day as deliberately as nature. So last week, I introduced the American Transcendentalism 5 different parts of practices, which became Thoreau's morning work of contemplation, study, sauntering, excursions, and conversations. So I was thinking of some examples of morning work, of how we can start our day as part of a waking up or spiritual discipline that is intentional or deliberate. And it's a wide range that people pull from these types of activities or practices, such as exercise routine, yoga, tai chi, running, biking, mindful walking, tea or coffee sipping, reading, writing, meditation, or an art practice. And all of these are kind of ways to select an approach to our life that is reflective of noticing how we're living, where we are, what our dreams are, what our list of things we want to accomplish that week or that year or in our life. And to have an intentional plan or ways that help keep us on track, to keep us alert to new ideas, new plans, new ideas for our life. So what I wanted to use today was an example of writing or journaling as in order to reflect or remember or directly experience our own life. This is what Thoreau would call, the morning work. So in these transcripts, I found part of a journal entry of that 4-day trip I took back in 2008. So I want to share this as part of that memory and perception linked together as a practice. This past fall, 2008, I took a 4-day trip to Concord, Massachusetts during the first week of November. The Reverend Scott Alexander, former minister of First Church Holton, was scheduled to be in Concord and lead a conference on large church growth in the UUA. And although the Holton Unitarian Society didn't qualify as one of the largest or fastest growing churches in the movement, Scott was looking for a fun and interesting roommate and gave me a call. The conference was being held at the historic Colonial Inn on the square in Concord, a place known for its fine dining, New England pot pie on the menu, a decent pub, in-room Wi-Fi, which was a big deal at the time, and live jazz entertainment nightly. When ministers who were attending the conference asked me in a somewhat confused manner as to why I was there, being from UU Holton, one of the smaller churches in our movement, I simply say, I'm on a research and relaxation project. So I wasn't attending the conference. I was just on a personal retreat. So one of those nights I made this journal entry of an experience on this Concord trip. And I had forgotten all about that this happened until I came across this file. During my trip to Concord, my research and relaxation project, as I called it, I had the privilege of staying at the historic Colonial Inn on the east end of the downtown square. The Colonial Inn, if you've been there, is a sprawling structure with no apparent reason for why or when a new section was added to the building. It's been there for over 200 years. Over the course of a couple of hundred years, it has become a Rubik's Cube of a building. Well, my roommate and I, the Most Reverend Scott Alexander, found ourselves at the Colonial Inn bar one night. Sounds like the lead-in to a joke. The bar was so small, the front row and the back row were almost the same row. The bar was no larger than this room, and there was a triangular section over in one end, and then the band had a small stage. The bar has a noted reputation in the area for its live entertainment, and that night, Sweet Willie D, the Deacon of the Blues, was performing with his band, the Colonial Walk, guitar, bass, and drums. Scott and I were near the front. Everybody is near the front. About 5 feet from Sweet Willie D. Willie D is a clean-shaven, large black man in his 50s, I'd say. He was wearing dress pants, a brown vinyl belt, and a polyester sport coat. He looked more like a full-of-brushed salesman from the early 70s, but Sweet Willie D gave it the look of cool. And Sweet Willie D knows how to put on a show. He knows how to sing and play the blues. He didn't have quite enough stage space to move around like Mick Jagger, but he knows how to pack a lot into a small space. After the first set, the band exits out a small door at the back stage of this corner. Scott and I decided to leave during the break, and as we were going down the back stairwell to our room, there is Sweet Willie D leaning against the wall with the band members. Apparently the back door of the stage opened directly into this back stairwell. And apparently this back stairwell doubled as a musician's lounge. We talked for a couple of minutes and complimented Willie on the show. And as we talked, I began to realize that Willie was perhaps younger than I had initially thought, closer to my own age, which I was 50 at the time, 45. He said he had just gotten out of the hospital after a long illness and that this was his first show back on tour. He had looked dynamite on stage, but here in the stairwell he was noticeably fatigued, and the look on his face was like an athlete just returning from serious injury, wondering if he could still go 100%. We shook hands and gave him our best as we continued down the stairwell. Sweet Willie D flashed us $1 million smile, flavored by a dose of the blues. About 20 minutes or so later, Scott and I were sitting in our hotel room, and suddenly we could hear the band starting back up again. In this Rubik's Cube of a building, believe it or not, our room was directly under the bar. So even though we had decided to call it a night, we could still sit right there in the comfort of room 101, and listen to Sweet Willie D, the Deacon of the Blues, work late into the night. From the night shift, we now go to the morning work. That was my entrance into the rest of the talk, which I'm not going to share this morning. But what I find interesting, when it comes back to this memory and perception, I would not have remembered many of those details, of like what Sweet Willie D was wearing for a belt, if I had not made a note or written that down. At the time, you think you're going to be able to put it back together in some sort of memory or arrangement. Perception is clear seeing. It's this exploration of human consciousness, and perception, as how Peck uses it, is clear seeing. As clearly as we can possibly see at this particular time. Over time, when you go back and say, look at things you had written years before and reread some of those entries, it's interesting or enlightening to see how your perceptions have changed from that point of clear seeing to this point of as clearly seeing as we possibly can. But it's noticeably different. So this is something we'll explore through the summer with these specific meditations to see how do we piece together portions of our life from memories of our father, memories of our childhood. How many of those can we access with memory and perception? And how many of those are just have kind of vanished into our subconscious or to the ether around us? So this week's summer meditation, Linda and I were having a campfire on Thursday night. It was calm, about low 60s, a little cooler, and it doesn't get dark now until almost 9 p.m. We had a little bit of music playing on the little portable Bose speaker, turned down low so you could still hear the fire crackling and still hear your music. And on the Oxbow where we are, there's this inlet. It's like a small lagoon of quiet water that's tucked in behind the Oxbow. And it's a perfect spot for quiet water wildlife, wild heron, birds, young ducks. It's like a small inlet lagoon pond. Usually this time of year, when it's warm, 70s to 80s, we'll hear the bullfrogs croaking at 9 o'clock at night in that lagoon. And the fireflies in June are starting to circulate around the fire. But that night, none of that was going on. And it was around 9 o'clock, and I've been sitting, well, 9 o'clock, we started hearing a ruckus from the lagoon down by the river, easy earshot from the campfire. I've been sitting on this campfire spot for over 30 years, many nights at the fireside, but I had never heard this particular sound before. So I headed down the stream to get a better take on the sound, and I pulled out my phone with the sound voice recorder to get a recording. By the time I got back to the fire, Linda had already tracked down the sound on her phone app and identified the ruckus as the mating call of the American toad. And I have a clip here. It's only a 30-second clip. And this is not as wild or full as it got, but this is the best recording I did get. So just give you an idea. Down by the stream, you could hear the separation of sound as they were along the stream and deep into this lagoon. And the different pitches, and at certain times there were like 7 to 8 of these going on at the same time. So this doesn't really do it justice, but I'm glad I got that short clip. You know, we just happened to hit it on the right night. This time of year, the temperature right, and I'm sure the American Toads have been doing this for the last 30 years, but I had never caught it, never noticed it. Maybe my music was playing too loud, don't know what it was, but it's an example of just catching, just being awake or noticing something that perhaps it's been there the whole time, but you never picked up on it as something interesting or noteworthy. And we retain it maybe for a couple of days. I always think I'm going to remember something that happened to me, but after 7, 8, 9 days, unless I have written it down in a dream journal, a dream, or something that happens, a wildlife sighting. Thoreau was doing this every day in his sauntering hikes in the afternoon, taking detailed notes, like I was noticing the color of Willie D's belt. And putting the time into recording this for whatever purpose it is. It doesn't have to be for publication. It doesn't have to be for monetary compensation. But these are parts of our lives that we retain, carry with us. We can tell a good story about it at some point, or to show a photograph of it. So here is your meditation exercise for the week to try out for your morning work. At least 2 times this week, sit down for a few minutes and recall or reflect on something interesting or significant that happened that day or the previous day, within 48 or 60 hours, that you still remember vividly, and take a few notes on it. It doesn't have to be well written, but just images, a few words or a phrase of something you were feeling or thinking or noticed. These fragments are like part of journal writing, and that practice can take so many different forms. Oftentimes, I'm just making entries on my phone, a list of images that may trigger some more memories. But it's a matter of just perception of the world around us and our own interaction, our place in it. So all these other practices we talked about, being yoga, body exercises, mental exercises, Summer is just such a lush, packed time of year for the senses, to smell, to touch, to feel, and to observe so much of larger nature around us. So this morning, let's breathe with me for 2 deep breaths as we close today's summer meditation. May our lives be reflections of the beauty, peace, and joy that is possible in this world. And may the love we find in this place sustain us as we go our separate ways today. May your week be full. Amen.
That's a wrap.